Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2024 movie titled Don't Move. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. The opening scene introduces us to Iris lying next to her sleeping husband, looking very distressed. She wakes up early and grabs a red toy boat and a pocket knife. Iris leaves her phone behind, gets into her car, and drives somewhere. After a long drive, she arrives in a park, where she stops and begins climbing a little cliff. Iris quickly reaches the top, where she finds a memorial to a young kid. She looks at his image for a bit before carving an M into a tree with her pocket knife. After that, Iris moves towards the edge of the cliff and decides to take her own life. Despite her reservations, she seemed to want to do it. But just as she's about to leap, a man arrives out of nowhere and begins speaking to her. Icarus asks him to leave, but he resists, introducing himself as Richard. He recalls seeing a memorial back there and suspects it belongs to someone close to her. He understands her desire for solitude, as he, too, longs for it, which is why he came here. Next, Richard discusses his traumatic past, revealing that he was in a car accident in college and lost his girlfriend, Chloe. The most distressing part is that they engaged in a fight and exchanged harsh words just prior to the crash. Richard recalls how he was unable to move for 2 months and became confined in a hospital bed. This deeply moves Iris, prompting her to openly discuss her son's death. She describes how her family had come to this location to have some fun together. Her husband was engraving their initials into a tree, and Iris was collecting wildflowers. Unfortunately, while gathering sticks for marshmallow roasting, their son fell off a cliff and tragically lost his life. Iris wishes God had taken her rather than her son. Richard responds by sympathizing with her and stating that he will not do anything to change her mind about her decision. However, he reassures her that today is a beautiful day and that suffering damage does not imply hopelessness. Richard then proceeds to depart. But moments later, after some thought, Iris changes her mind and follows him. The two soon arrive at their respective cars and say their goodbyes. Following this, the two attempt to depart, but Iris realizes that Richard's car is parked too close to hers, preventing her from getting in. As a result, Richard steps out to assist her, and he abruptly turns his beast mode on. He then ties her hands and feet with rope before putting her in his truck. Iris awakens and finds herself in the back seat of Richard's car as he drives. She attempts to call someone using her watch, but he informs her that there is no signal in the region. Richard then casually displays her son's red toy boat and begins ridiculing her. At this moment, Iris pulls out her knife and diverts his attention with a chat about Chloe, all while delicately removing the shackles from her hands. She then asks what he intends to do to her, to which Richard responds that he has a small cabin in the woods where they would go and that he will braid her hair. Just then, Iris frees herself and assaults the man with her knife. She fails to critically injure him, and the car collides with a nearby tree. Following the crash, an enraged Richard pulls Iris's hair, prompting Iris to choke him with the seat belt. She eventually escapes after some struggle. She uses her knife to cut the ropes around her feet, but Richard catches up. He then shows her an empty syringe and tells her that he shot her with a relaxant chemical, which would render her fully immobile in about 20 minutes. She will initially lose feeling in her fingertips, followed by tingling in her legs to the point where she is unable to walk. Finally, she will be unable to talk. When Iris hears this, she feels afraid and rushes into the woods to escape the maniac. Richard quietly follows, reminding her that rushing will only make the medicine act faster. The young woman continues to run as quickly as she can, setting a timer on her watch for 20 minutes. Unfortunately, the effect begins to affect her legs, and she can hardly walk. She soon collapses on the ground, unable to feel her legs. Now that she can't run, Iris tries to hide amid a tree's roots. However, she accidentally positions herself near an anthill, causing the ants to climb onto her body and face. This prompts her to scream and reveal her whereabouts to Richard. But before he can grab her, Iris slides into a river, hoping that the stream will take her away. Richard warns Iris that she won't be able to swim, but she's ready to risk all instead of surrendering. After drifting for a bit, she gathers all of her might to grab a log and exit the river. Iris checks her watch and discovers that she has only 1 minute remaining. She still strives as hard as she can to get to a safe place, but her time is up, and she becomes utterly paralyzed. Shortly after, Iris spots a farmer mowing the lawn nearby but is unable to request assistance. Bill, an old farmer, approaches her and asks if she needs help, but Iris is unable to respond. He quickly finds she's awake and that just her eyes can move. They begin communicating by blinking once to indicate yes and twice to indicate no. Bill realizes she is in peril and promises to call the cops and get her aid as quickly as possible. Subsequently, the empathetic elderly man arrives with a wheelbarrow to lift her and transport her to his cabin. Bill then tries to call for help, but when someone knocks on the door, Iris blinks multiple times, indicating to Bill that she is trying to warn him. He meets Richard at the door, who claims he is looking for his injured wife and that they were involved in an accident. Bill asks him to wait outside while he calls for help. However, the maniac ignores him and enters the house. When he is unable to locate Iris, he claims that he is ill and must rest. He also asks the elderly man for his phone, alleging that he lost his in the accident. Bill is enraged by the unannounced entrance and threatens to contact the cops. However, Richard suddenly bursts into tears and encourages Bill to proceed with his plan. When the old farmer notices this, he asks for his name, to which Richard replies that it is Andrew. He reveals that his wife, Chloe, has mental health issues and often accuses him of doing undesirable things. Richard reveals they had an accident that caused him to lose consciousness, and when he awoke, she had disappeared. He goes on to say that she occasionally becomes catatonic, refusing to speak or move. Richard worries that if the police find her, they would institutionalize her, and he doesn't want to lose her. Throughout this, we observe Iris hiding behind the couch and near the window, listening to everything. Bill feels awful for the man, and when Richard asks if he has anyone else in his life, Bill says he had a wife who died of a heart attack. Bill is now sure that the man is ethically upright and decides to reveal the truth about Iris. However, Richard's phone starts vibrating in his pocket, contradicting his earlier claim that he lost it. This ultimately convinces Bill that the man is lying, so he orders him to leave the house. Richard, on the other hand, recognizes that Iris is hiding here and asks the elderly man where she is. Bill lies to get him off his back, claiming that he found and kept a woman by his shed. Richard approaches the shed but first asks for the elderly man's phone. Next, Bill calls the police to report an intruder in his home. The two men then battle, but Bill shows remarkable strength for his age. He severely beats and knocks the maniac to the ground. The powerful old guy delivers a few solid kicks to the waist. However, Richard begins to divert the old man's attention by explaining how he caused his wife's heart attack. He lunges for a nearby knife and stabs the old man in the leg before repeatedly stabbing the poor man to death. After this, Richard picks up the phone and realizes the police have been talking all along. He becomes outraged and pours gasoline all over the home, setting it on fire. Meanwhile, we observe that Iris is able to move her finger and attempt to alarm the psychopath, but without success. After setting fire to the house, Richard escapes in Bill's truck. Iris tries to grasp the curtain rope, and Richard discovers that the curtains open and close on their own. Richard promptly returns to the house, realizes she is still inside, and takes her away. He then blames her for forcing him to do this. As they drive away, Richard tells Iris that he has never killed a man before, but everything has a first time. Suddenly, he receives a call from his daughter, who eagerly informs him of her recent good test results. She says that she and her mother are coming to his cabin to celebrate the news. However, Richard becomes disturbed and shares his thoughts with his wife. He claims that he must be his best during his cabin time alone. However, his wife claims that these alone times have become more common in recent months, so they will come regardless. Richard is infuriated upon hearing this, but he reluctantly agrees. Soon after, they stop at a gas station, where Richard spots some firefighters approaching Bill's home. He then goes inside to pay for his gas. Meanwhile, we observe that Iris's hands are beginning to regain some mobility, prompting her to attempt informing the people around her. As a child approaches her window, she unbuckles her seatbelt, overcome with thoughts of her son. When the child's mother arrives to take him away, Iris gives her a peculiar look, warning her of the danger. Richard notices that there are people around Iris, so he promptly returns to the truck. He puts her seatbelt back on and goes on his way. Soon after, they reach the scene of the previous accident, where Richard changes his clothes. He then grabs another drug-filled syringe and places it on the truck dashboard. However, as he prepares to tow his broken truck, a police officer approaches. The officer asserts that he has received a report regarding his truck and needs to conduct an investigation. It turns out that some folks at the petrol station were concerned by Iris's unusual appearance and called the police. The officer requests to speak with Iris, but Richard admits that she is too inebriated and unable to communicate. He claims his wife was in an accident and he came to aid her. However, the policeman is skeptical due to the caller's sighting of them at the gas station and the fact that Richard has a wound on his forehead. At this point, Iris slowly rolls down the window, attempting to warn the officer. She soon manages to move her lips and offer assistance. And then the officer learns the truth. The psychopath viciously beats the cop until he dies. He then loads the officer into his police car and snatches his firearm. Following that, he sets fire to the patrol car, destroying any evidence of his misdeeds. Next, we observe that the syringe he placed on the dashboard earlier is missing. Richard is horrified that he has already killed 2 people and decides to blame Iris. Iris, who can now speak again, begins to tell him about Chloe's death. She questions whether her death led to his mental breakdown. Upon hearing this, the man abruptly stops his truck in a fit of rage, declaring that he is not insane and that Chloe's death in the accident brought him clarity. Richard discovered his true calling when he witnessed Chloe's death from a crack in her neck. It gave him enormous gratification, and he felt like a god, with the ability to end people's lives. He also reveals that his final words to her before her death were, "Thank you," because she helped him understand his true mission. Upon hearing this, Iris struggles to maintain her composure and implores him to allow her to depart. She claims she does not know his real name or address and swears not to report him. She also advises him to consider how his wife and children will react if they learn about his actions. She expresses her desire for him to leave her somewhere along the road, suggesting that they might both forget the events. Richard, on the other hand, refuses to listen to her and announces that his plans have changed. Soon after, they reach a restricted area near a lake, where Richard informs her that this is their final destination. He adds it's a shame their time together had to end this way, because they would have had a lovely time in the cabin. Iris abruptly stabs him with a needle, but she is unable to exert enough force to push it. This allows the man to gently remove the syringe and pour the chemicals from it. Iris, frustrated, asks Richard why he didn't just let her die earlier, to which he says that it was fate and she was destined for him. However, she claims that there is no fate, no God, and that he is simply a sad little man without a name. Following this, Richard grabs a knife, places Iris in a rowboat, and enters. He then rows to the center of the lake, where he plans to toss her in with some bricks so her body does not float. But before he can do so, Iris begins to cry and asks him for one final favor. She tells him she has Mateo's toy boat in her pocket and wants to hold it while she dies. And when Richard approaches her to fetch the toy, Iris quickly snatches the dagger and stabs him near the neck. Richard, severely hurt, falls into the lake as a result. He furiously tries to climb back up, but Iris grabs his gun and shoots at him many times, leading him to fall back into the water. Unfortunately, Iris's wildly fired shots left holes in the boat. It quickly begins to sink, and it appears that she will also perish. However, despite having her hands tied, Iris refuses to give up and swims to the surface with all of her strength. The final scene shows Iris relaxing on the dock. From a distance, she observes that Richard has also surfaced. As she approaches him, she discovers that he is choking on his own blood and is on the verge of death. The film ends with Iris telling Richard, "Thank you," and leaving him to die. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.